Hello, folks, and welcome to this short summary. This is the first short summary that I'm using with a newer mic. I hope that is telltale, hopefully by the better audio quality and sound. So if it isn't, just let me know in the comments, and I will try and fix it because I have zero idea about what I'm doing with this microphone. However, this short summary is going to be on the 1900 Galveston hurricane. This hurricane goes by a few names. It is also known as the Great Galveston Hurricane, not very commonly called Hurricane 1, as it was the first known hurricane of the 1900 season. Regionally, it is simply known as the Great Storm, or more specifically, the Great Storm of 1900. We would see the system form on the 27th of August, or at least this was the first time the system was seen. At this point, it was 1,000 kilometers east of the Windward Islands. We would, after a few days, see landfall on Bonnie, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, on the Dominican Republic at tropical storm strength on September 2nd, preceded very closely on the next day by a landfall near Santiago de Cuba, also at tropical storm strength. From here on out, the tropical storm then becomes a hurricane after going near Florida, and then intensifies in the Gulf of Mexico from the 6th to the 7th of September. This hurricane would then peak on the 7th of September, reaching winds of 145 miles per hour at a landfall pressure of 936 millibars. The hurricane would make landfall near Houston, Texas, specifically Galveston, Texas, on the 8th of September at 8 o'clock Central Daylight Time. It landfell with winds of 140 miles per hour. Deaths from this hurricane range quite quite hard, anywhere from a minimum of 6,000 deaths to most sources saying that 8,000 deaths is a good number, all the way to some sources saying it up to 12,000 deaths from this hurricane. We would also see a minimum of 30 million US dollars in damage. And we would see why that's a minimum in our impacts here. First of all, before going into Texas and the United States, nearly every single river in Jamaica reportedly swelled and overflowed their banks. This costed thousands of British pounds in damage. Near Santiago de Cuba, a rainfall maximum of 319.5 millimeters was reported, which is very, very close to a foot. That's somewhere around 10, 11 inches. According to a telegraph message by the mayor of Trinidad, all crops in Trinidad were completely destroyed, which is absolutely insane. Now, the bare minimum, $30 million, comes from the fact that just in Galveston County alone, $30 million in damage was done. This is really the only time where we see damage estimates is in Galveston and nowhere else. So this is why the storm caused at least 30 million. Galveston would go on to see storm surge of 15 feet, with multiple estimated wind reports being 120 miles per hour, which would make sense given this thing landfell with winds of 140. And additionally, the 15-foot storm surge is a very big problem because at the time, Galveston's maximum height was only 8.7 feet above sea level, which is practically nothing. So that was a very big problem. This led to every single road in Galveston taking some kind of water damage, and every single bridge connecting Galveston to the mainland was completely washed away, which, as you can imagine, did not help relief efforts in the slightest. This storm would actually go on to surprisingly impact even the upper, even the upper United States, with Chicago seeing wind gusts of 84 miles per hour and Buffalo seeing 78 mile per hour wind gusts. In fact, this right middle picture here of a brick wall corner is actually from a destroyed ironworks in Buffalo. Now, nearly every single American, or at least at some point, has heard of the Galveston hurricane. I know I definitely have, since I'm big into weather, in case you couldn't tell. Um, but there is as much good as it might surprisingly come as there was bad. Some things that did absolutely not help were things such as the head of the NWS that was in charge of looking over Galveston, Mr. Isaac Klein, said that it was impossible for a hurricane to materially damage Galveston. I think it's safe to say that he was proved wrong, and he would be proved wrong again in 1915. So there's that. It was also the fact that the word hurricane, much like the word tornado at the time, was discouraged, practically banned by the Weather Bureau. This was to not cause panic. However, I would much rather want someone to panic and take action to save their life rather than them die because they didn't know what was coming, you know. That's just me though. Weather Bureau didn't know much. Not as much as we know now. Um, Speaking of the Weather Bureau, its director at the time forced weather forecasting offices, WFOs, to go in completely blind when it may, specifically when forecasting tropical systems. They could not get communications from Cuba as the director blocked them from doing so, which is a problem, as we'll see, and also forced WFOs to ask permission to issue warnings. I cannot stress enough just how much I hate this. And if I go in on this, we're going to be here for another 10 minutes, so I'm not going to. This storm was incredibly well predicted, especially for the time, by at the time was the most technologically advanced weather observatory in the world, Belen College Observatory, based in Cuba, or in Cuba. Hell, even one researcher predicted that this storm would make landfall near San Antonio, Texas, which wasn't too far off. Overall, this system is the fourth deadliest hurricane in the Atlantic, and I believe it is the number one deadliest to have made landfall on the United States. However, here's where the good comes in here. Very, very soon after this, the construction of a seawall began for Galveston. Galveston had been dredging sand away for some time to help with the construction of the town and the island, and this left it completely exposed. So the seawall was an immense improvement over literally nothing. This would not be completed until 1963, believe it or not, when the full 10-mile or 16-kilometer wall was finished. However, most of the main part was actually built by around 1915 when a second hurricane came through, and the parts that were unprotected saw the exact same devastation as before with this hurricane. We would also see an immense heightening of the entirety of the city. Millions of pounds of sand were dredged from the bay, which helped with deeper draft ships coming into the bay, but also, putting that underneath things caused some places of Galveston to be raised by 18 feet, which is insane. that is, I'm pretty sure that's higher than my house. Something like that. I think my house is, I don't know, 20 foot tall. I'm not an engineer. But I mean, that is a monumental task even today, and they pulled it off just in the 1900s. With that being said, folks, that is all that I have for the Galveston hurricane. Again, I do hope that my audio is indeed improved, both in quality and again in sound. If it's not in sound, then I will try and figure out something. But again, that is all that I have. I thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you learned something. Now, see you in the next video.